I don't know.
Not really. We were talking about football on
Next door to Valley. Yeah.
Burn night there every day.
Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah, I'm really
Yeah.
I never understood what
I know. Egos. The egos are too big. Those are athletic directors.
They're running it so you're ready to go.
It may have been one of my mom's characters. She sent me a picture. She sent me a
How
video. Yeah, he chased it over into David and
So on the map, it shows my house tonight.
They'll be fine.
But on the verbiage at the bottom, it says open drive is Tuesday next week. So I didn't know if there was a.
I think they have. He's fine. I talked to I talked to the vet, and the vet said, well, cats, number one, their reflexes are way faster than elsewhere. It's bizarre to me, but the vet said due to the vegetation on the ear, and there's no vasculature that can't spread. I know I have
That is not taxed.
Good evening. Can everybody hear in the back?
Yeah.
You're hearing okay? Not used to this big of a crowd here. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight. My name is Patrick Johnson. I'm the current mayor of Double Oak. Before we dive into tonight's content, I'd like to introduce our presenters who will be discussing the findings of our recent study. Randall Anglin, he's our Public Works Director. We've got Scott Rushing, and he is the
Water Resources Team Leader.
Water Resources Team Leader. We have Dr. Kay, who is part of the member of the town council here. I asked the council to divide and conquer with these meetings. We've got Chris Logenauer, oh, he's out front. I believe we have Officer Skelko here tonight as well. And I think that's most of the administration. So, again, I appreciate you being here. As many of you know, our town has faced ongoing challenges with flooding and drainage. And this study was conducted to identify long-term solutions to protect our homes, roads, and infrastructure. I got a little bored this week as we were preparing for this. I went out and into our E-Code 360, which is where all of our resolutions, all of our minutes, all of our agenda topics, all of our ordinances are at. It's a link off of our website. I typed in the word drainage. And anybody want to take a guess how far our drainage issues in Double Oak go back?
As long as I've lived here.
1975 when the town began. I counted over 120 some town council meeting agendas that reference some sort of drainage. I'm sure a lot of the folks that were mentioned in there, some of them may still be around, some of them are not around. And so why I bring that up tonight is that tonight isn't to solve anything. Tonight is to get an even better understanding of where we're at with the town, the impacts it has in terms of rainwater, of course, and stormwater, and more importantly, some of the things that we can do to start mitigating that. So this evening we will focus on gathering the information. So this is going to be a two-way. I've had the sign-up sheets out there so we can coordinate back with communication. We'll grab the sign-up sheet in just a few minutes and we'll bring it in because we are going to allow up to 2 minutes to speak with everybody that signed up. 2 minutes because we've got this place for 2 hours and we're going to be doing a lot of our work up here at the board, okay, at the map tonight. And I think that Scott will talk you through how we do that. It is important to note, though, that we are not here tonight to present immediate solutions. Instead, this meeting is about thoughtful conversation and due diligence to guide the town towards the next steps in improving our drainage system. To ensure that we can make the presentation and allow citizens a chance, as I referenced, 2 minutes. And I'll apologize in advance if one of you or many of you go beyond the 2 minutes when we have to raise our hand and say, thank you. That's not trying to be rude, it's just trying to give everybody an opportunity to speak. So a little bit about the study. The study identifies several key areas for improvement, such as new detention ponds, storm drain diversions, updates to town ordinances. The one critical element that will determine the success of any effort is really going to be you, the citizen, the residents. No matter what the infrastructure changes we make, our drainage system will only work as intended if each resident takes responsibility for managing water flow on their own property. This means regularly clearing debris from your drainage ditches, ensuring the culverts under driveways are open and functioning properly, keeping vegetation under control so the water can move freely. These are just a few items that if you drive around this town, and I've driven around many times, you gotta remember, this town was developed from 1974 to, I think, the last subdivision was Kyle Court up here off of Waketon. And so we span from 74, almost, 50 years? We just had our birthday. 50 years of development, and every developer did it different. Until later on, when the town did start to develop some ordinances for how drainage would be set up. So if you drive through Taylor Oaks, if you drive through Estates of Double Oak, if you drive through Caruth Estates, some of the newer subdivisions, you'll see that they were designed and built in a way that the ditches are very prevalent, and even many of them have little strips of concrete that run down in front of their houses. But many of that's silted in. Guilty as charged. Mine is silted in. I haven't cleaned it out in about 7 years. I need to go do that. My wife reminds me of that constantly. How are you going to go in front of the town, talk about cleaning out your bar ditches, and you haven't cleaned ours up? So rest assured, next few weeks I'll have mine done. You know, the town may make major improvements to the overall drainage system, but we cannot maintain the ditches and culverts on your property. We cannot come on your property and make those changes. Your role is vital without active participation, and even the best infrastructure improvements will fall short if we don't all pitch in. Tonight we will review the study results, discuss how we can move forward together. The key takeaway is that improving our drainage situation will require a collective effort by the citizens and by the town. By working together, we can make Double Oak safer and a better protected place as it relates to the trials and tribulations we have with those large rainstorms. Many of you have picked up one of the handouts. That's awesome, and they were here to pick up now or to take with you. There's a lot of reading in there. I literally spent quite a few hours comparing the 2007 drainage study, which was more of a micro study, to the 2024 study, which is more of a macro study, to see how this compares. There were some improvements done after the 2007 that were documented. There were recommendations that weren't. I can tell you this, and I've talked to Scott and Half, could I get those prices now that we had in 07? Because if we do, I think we can move forward on a lot of projects. But as you'll see, on a macro level, some of those aren't going to be possible without the town getting creative. So again, I appreciate everybody being here. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Scott. So thank you. By the way, there will be some open dialogue throughout this, so but I'm going to let Scott kind of take it away from here.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Johnson. Mayor Johnson said, my name is Scott Rushing. I'm with Half Associates, and I'm a water resources team leader out of our Fort Worth office. And I've been a hydrology and hydraulics engineer for the past 16 years. You don't hear me?
Yeah.
You good? Okay. I've been a hydrology and hydraulics engineer for the past 16 years, and I've done a lot of stormwater master plans, very similar to your town and even larger towns as well. But I want to talk to you just on the macro level. I think Mayor Johnson did a good job of explaining the difference between kind of the micro level and the maintenance, and then the macro level, the bigger problems throughout the town, as you can see on the map. These are the results of the study, the floodplain mapping, depth mapping for the 100-year floodplain. So it shows more than just the mapping along Timber Creek, your main creek. It shows the floodplain throughout the entire town. And this presentation will kind of describe how we arrived at that mapping, what went into it, and then some of the conceptual improvements on a larger scale that went into solving some of the problems that were identified from the study. So as Mayor Johnson said, there's a long history of flooding in Double Oak. A lot of significant storm events have occurred over the last several years, which is what precipitated a study like this and to get a more macro view of flooding across the town. Some of the challenges associated with the town is, Denton County is obviously a very fast-growing county. There's a lot of development occurring not only within Double Oak, but outside of Double Oak for drainage area that comes into the town. That's definitely a challenge that the town faces, some drainage area that comes to you, and then the challenge of you drain to Flower Mound, so any major improvements that occur in Double Oak need to account for potential impacts to Flower Mound as well. The majority of the town is already fully developed. There's a real challenge with retrofitting existing systems or fixing existing channels when you already have a lot of homes or infrastructure in place, roadways in place. It becomes a real challenge to implement large-scale drainage improvement projects without causing somewhat of an impact on the neighborhood and the town. And then Mayor Johnson already talked about maintenance responsibility. That's certainly an issue on a more micro level in maintaining bar ditches and culvert crossings. And then funding, of course, we'll talk a little bit about the cost of a lot of these projects. They are very large dollar. The cost is not my fault, Mayor Johnson. It's construction costs that have gone up, not my fees. But we'll talk a little about funding opportunities as well. So the main study objectives were to identify the existing flooding hotspots across the town. And on the map up there, and we can look at it later in more detail, those main hotspots are identified by what you see in the kind of purple or dark pink rectangles that highlight a lot of those existing flooding hotspots that were identified. We wanted to develop conceptual improvements then to fix a lot of those major flooding problems that we saw throughout the town. And then to assist, with planning of these large-scale projects on a more multi-year and a multi-phase approach, how do we fund these projects and how do they actually get implemented. So I'll talk high level on the modeling approach that we took to arrive at the mapping that you see on the map, the floodplain mapping. So we have two modeling software that we use. Okay, so for hydrology, which is determining how much water is on the ground after a rain event, a certain amount at the beginning of the rain event will certainly soak into the ground, and once it's saturated, it's all runoff. So that's hydrology, is figuring out how much runoff is in the creeks or in the channels or in the ditches. And we used a program called HEC-HMS. It's a very widely used program in the industry. It's put out by the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Like I said, it's very, very common in our industry to use that program. And then for hydraulics, which is once the water gets in the creek or the storm drains or the ditches, how does it behave? Where does it go? How high does it get? Where does it flow? And we developed a 2D model of a program called InfoWorks ICM. In our industry, that's the Cadillac of 2D modeling packages. And when I say 2D modeling, it means we let rain just fall on the terrain in the model, and then it goes wherever it goes. It collects, and you can see how deep it gets in your low-lying areas, how deep it gets in your creeks and your ditches and your channels, which at the end of the day, the results of that are what you see on the map, the flood depth map that you see, like I said, up here. Some of the data that we used the most up-to-date land use for the town and also for areas that drain to the town, so from outside in. The latest soils information, as I mentioned earlier, there's a certain, different soils have certain properties on how much they can take in before they get saturated and they start running off. We used the latest rainfall data from NOAA. It's called NOAA Atlas 14. It's the latest rainfall information throughout the state of Texas and even outside of Texas. That's the latest rainfall information that we use in the study. We used 2009 2009 LiDAR terrain data, or sorry, 2019 LiDAR terrain data. That's the latest available and best available in the area. And we use record drawings to input various storm drain improvements or other improvements that Mayor Johnson alluded to that have occurred over the years. And then we did field visits where we came out and we measured, took photographs, looked at the condition of up to 25 culverts. So there's more than 25 culverts underneath. I'm not talking about the driveway culverts in front of your home. I'm talking about underneath the roadway, taking water from one side of the road to the other. Those culverts we found the 25 most significant and incorporated those into our model to make sure we're accounting for how that interacts with the floodplain and the ditches throughout the town. So for flooding hotspot identification, we did identify 13 areas. We identified potentially flooded structures within that floodplain boundary that we determined in those hotspot locations. And so you're going to see those up on the map. They're going to be in green. And you'll see them right there in green. Now, just because it shows they're potentially flooded doesn't mean that they actually are. It just means we intersected a building polygon with that mapping. If it touched that mapping, we just went ahead and called it, hey, there's potentially flooding on this property or at that structure. That property, that structure may be elevated outside of it. It may not actually flood in the home, but we just did a simple intersect, and that's how we got to the green structures that you'll see when you come up and look at it on the map, or you may have it in front of you right now.
I can't read that. Is that in the handout somewhere?
This on the far right is, I don't believe that's in
It is not, that we'll have the drainage study. We're going to be loading up our website for you to be able to download documents. They're too large to email. A couple of these are too large to email, so we're going to be posting them out there. And then this way, because this is all public information, so it's yours. So you can go out and grab this information and pull it down. All that's in the handout is, we just kind of combined some of the information from what Scott's talking about, compared it to 2007, put some recommendations in terms of things to think about for the town, because we want to foster your thought process on how you can come back to us and help us with ideas to make it better.
Is the exact PowerPoint though going to be available?
Yeah, yeah. PowerPoint, the drainage study, the 2007 drainage study. We're going to put all those out on the website.
The table you see, it's in the report and it's in this PowerPoint presentation. And that's the third bullet point, which is the depth of roadway overtopping. So we looked at how deep does the flooding get at several significant or major roadways throughout those flooding hotspot areas. So area 1 is along Kings Road, kind of in the middle of town, south middle of town. I think everyone's familiar with that area. It gets really deep there, up to 5 feet deep for the 100-year event. And then you can kind of see the number, maybe you can see the numbers, but it ranges anywhere from 5 feet the worst to half a foot, but on average it was around 2 to 3 feet. Depth of flooding over the roadways in several locations throughout the town in these hotspot areas we found. So once we had determined those areas, we did a high-level prioritization effort of which one of those areas would rank the worst in terms of the flooding conditions. So we had 3 main criteria that we used. The first criteria was the number of parcels affected by the 25-year flood event. We didn't use the 100-year, we used the 25-year flood event. And we tallied up those number of parcels within those polygon areas to help us determine how many parcels are actually flooding in this location. Then we looked at the depth of flow for the 25-year event and the 2-year event. So your 2-year event's going to happen almost every year, maybe every other year. And that was to help determine not only the severity, which is the depth of flooding, but also the frequency. So if it's flooding during the 2-year event, that means it's flooding very frequently. If it's flooding only during a 25-year event, then it doesn't flood quite as often as it would for a 2-year event. So that particular criteria helped us understand severity of flooding and also the frequency of flooding. And then the last one was overtopping the roadway for the 25-year event. So if it had that, we consider that a safety or a potential emergency access issue. So conceptual alternatives, Mayor Johnson kind of alluded to those. They're in your packet from our study, and I'll show you a few of them on the board if you want to come up and look at them. But in general, the conceptual improvements are two large regional detention facilities. It could be multi-use facilities. Those would need to be in place to then facilitate future storm drain improvements or larger scale flood improvements throughout the town. Because if you just did the like the storm drain improvements, which you'll see in yellow, if we just did those big yellow storm drain improvements, then we would cause an adverse impact downstream on other neighbors in Double Oak and also within Flower Mound. So the detention alternatives they're intended to go in first to help reduce those impacts, and then you could facilitate constructing those larger scale improvements so you're not causing an issue on your neighbor downstream, whether it's in the town of Double Oak or within Flower Mound. But in conclusion, at a macro level, it is very high dollar in terms of the improvements. It's a very common problem across DFW and the state where you have these large scale improvements that cost a lot of money. How do you fund them? It's very challenging. There are a lot of grant funding opportunities out there. There's some other mechanisms to try to generate some funding for drainage improvement projects. And we can talk about some of those maybe later in the presentation if you want to talk to me about those afterwards. But it is a multi-year, multi-phase campaign, I would say, to help alleviate some of the larger macro issues in the town of Double Oak. And this project helped identify those improvement options and then some mechanisms for trying to fund those improvements to supplement not just the town fund, but also funds from the state or even federal funds. That's really all I had for my presentation. I know we have the board up here. It is a dry erase board, so if you want to mark on it, if you have a concern, we can document it that way. We also have some forms over here. There is public comment forms. You can put your name and your address, your email, what's the flooding location, what is your concern. I definitely want to take note of all those concerns and those locations. So when we do these studies, one of the data points that we use is drainage complaints across the community. And so we don't really know where those problems are unless they're told or documented by citizens. So we use that information to validate our models. Hey, our model shows flooding here, but we don't have any flooding complaints here. Our model shows nothing flooding here, but there's a lot of drainage complaints. So it helps us adjust and fine tune our model. So any input that you have related to flooding could help us refine our model and refine the study. So I appreciate your input. If you'd rather just talk to me up here at the board, or Randall or Mayor Johnson, happy to do that, or take your comment here on the form itself. Yes, sir.
Mr. Question, I don't see any differentiation between detention and retention devices, whatever. Is that, are we not going to make a distinction on that, or do we all follow the same?
It depends on the situation. A lot of times retention ponds are actually wet and they have some flood storage. So, some of the other ponds that are throughout the town, they're typically wet, correct? But they do provide some flood benefit. But the fact that they're already full of water during an event means there's not a whole lot of flood, mitigation caused by that pond. So a detention pond is usually dry. So when the flood event occurs, it has all that available area to store water and then release it slowly after.
Great question.
Yeah. I'm up for any other questions too.
I know that Flower Mound has a regulation that you and you develop, you have to on the property put a facility to retain as much water as now run off that property. So that they are home. But places like Bakery Park that is on this list of course do they have any retention or do they just pass it from? I thought that was one thing that's
It's a great question. I can answer unless you want to take it.
No, I want you to answer. They're going to leave you before. Well said.
That's an excellent question. So within our model, we did take into account the Vickery development. So we took their construction plans, we took their grading, which is already complete out there. They do have a pond, and they do have an outlet structure to try to release water at pre-development rates. That's what their engineer came up with, and that's what we used. That was not a design done by us, we just incorporated what they did. And so the flows coming into the town of Double Oak, whether it's to the south, and actually not all of it goes off to the east as well, those are both accounted for in terms of what impact the Vickery development had coming into Double Oak.
So then why is the issue that's identified as a problem?
Why is it identified as an issue?
On the list here, the four top items of issues. The runoff of the
Sure.
Yeah. So it's identified because we've spent a lot of time, or I spent a lot of time, and I know that Gene spends a lot of time speaking with the people that have the property surrounding the pond that flows from Vickery come in. And the pond is being able to take less and less water because of the amount of silt during the construction at Vickery that has ran down through and into our lakes. And not only that, then it's actually bled down to the next lake, to the next lake. And even though on the surface it doesn't look like it's that big of a deal, it is a big deal. And now they'll be fully built out here. If they're not already, they're getting close. And so all that water now is going to hit that concrete and hit those yards, and it's going to flush down into that lake. Their temporary restraining pond, right? Detention pond.
Yeah, that one is retention.
Yeah, it's retention, and it's going to come into Double Oak, into our retention, and it just basically, it's a domino effect that goes all the way down. Up to and including, we have a cross culvert that carries this water. So this is Double Oak responsibility for that cross culvert to carry that water down. If you speak with the two homeowners on both the right and the left side, or the east and west side of that, they will tell you that in a 1 to 2 inch rain event, it's now flooding well into their yards. It never did that before.
My point here back is really that if you're going to say that there's cost for Double Oak, and Vickery thought there's something cost. Whatever it is, because they...
Well, so there lies the rub with Vickery development. And Mayor Donnelly fought hard, and he did a great job of protecting Double Oak as best he could. But at the end of the day, that wasn't our land. That was not our land, and we had to deal with it. So they've come back, and so we, the town of Double Oak, and there's actually a Lakes Association there. I forget the name, what they call it.
The Pond Owners Association.
The Pond Owners Association. They literally are in constant contact with the engineers that did Vickery. And so we're always having these conversations, because what happened is Vickery's filling out, it's finishing out. What they wanted to do is kind of get a sign off from the Pond Association that there's no responsibility for anything happening. You think they're going to sign that? You think Double Oak's going to sign it? No, they're not. So we are really going to be in a perpetual, ongoing, I'm just going to call it what it is, battle with Vickery.
He talked about coming through and stretching and doing deeper for us.
The Pond Owners Association did something a few years back, but it's, no, they have no responsibility to what happens at Double Oak.
Who is the homeowners association?
It's all the homeowners that surround this. Okay, yeah, they have their own association. Yes, Phil.
I wanted to continue what this gentleman had said about how Flower Mound has a rule that when you build, you can't mess with the flow of the water. I thought that was a state law. I was told at some point when you build, the state requires that you can't add more water on your neighbors.
It's newer than the town of development in Double Oak. So for example, I live in Estates of Double Oak. When I looked at my survey before I bought my house, on the south side of my backyard, about 4 feet off of the fence to, I think it's about another 15 feet, all the way back to the back of my yard, I was told by the real estate people, you cannot build in that area because that is your designated water retention for your property. And so I know that in Estates of Double Oak, they have that. I would kind of assume, Billy, just asking, do you have something like that in Caruth?
I don't remember if, I think we more follow, like, you normally build on so much. But obviously, those of us that live right next to 407, they're not putting anything in your backyard.
Correct.
I mean,
It should be on your survey. If you have your survey, and again, it's all going to be dependent upon the age of your development. But I know it is in the Estates of Double Oak, it's on the surveys.
Right, but I guess in this discussion, what I'm hearing is you have no remedy if somebody else pushes something greater on you. And that doesn't.
We would have remedy. It would cost a lot of money.
Well, you can't, if you do anything to your property that causes downstream effect, you block water or it backs up above you, those people can come after you for making that change on your property.
Right,
That's what he's saying, why
then
didn't-
why are we having a debate about the development? Why are we just going after?
Back from zoning such money as well, I think.
It has, so we'll take a note on this, Randall, and we'll get that information. It has to do with what was done when they went to develop the property.
So I guess in your study, with what they said they were going to do when they developed the property, are they violating anything? Yes or no?
So, the drainage patterns from that property did not necessarily change. They did change some in terms of it's more concentrated in certain locations. Now, their drainage engineer did their study, did their plans. It showed that they were mitigating to the pre-development number to the town of Double Oak. So that's where the.
And are they doing it?
Well, another engineer's work that I looked at, and they have those plans. I can't speak to that engineer and what he did. Those plans do show that there's not an increase coming in the town of Double Oak. Now that may.
You have a model. Does the model say that their plants will water?
So my model has the outflow coming from that pond. I didn't have a rain-on mesh from that particular area. So I took an outflow hydrograph from that pond and applied it to the town of Double Oak at that location.
So your model assumes the input they said they would get is what we're getting.
My model assumes the output that they said they would give from their plans. So we took their design and then we came up with a hydrograph flow coming into the town based off of their design.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand. So all of the water inputs into the town are assumed to be fixed based on some plan. And then the water that gathers in town is, I'd say, active in that you run a simulation of water collection falling on the ground.
Correct.
So wouldn't that say that one would question the model? Because if the inputs coming into the town are wrong, then I don't know what I believe in the model.
Well, the inputs coming into the town, this is my work, it is based off of what they designed. I determined the flow based on their design coming into the town, and yes, it is applied at the town boundary. Now, the reason I couldn't actually do a rain-on mesh through their area is because it's post the LiDAR data that I had, so I don't really know. We'd have to go out and fly we'd do a survey of that and get it in the model.
And
so
I'm just pulling on the comment you made, that the people that live there are saying, water never came this high before, and it came, it's coming higher now. So a simple person says, well, there must be higher flow.
But it might be going down in other places.
My
So
thought
it's
was that
overall-
they put silt barriers up that they were supposed to prevent their silt from coming into our pond. Do we have any pictures from the pond owners that took?
There's lots of pictures.
Now, was there enough to prove that they didn't put the barriers up required?
The Pond Owners Association is very active.
Yeah, I guess my only point in the discussion is, if we're impacted by outside forces, frankly, I think litigation is a remedy.
Can we talk about quadrant 1 tonight, though? Because that's what this meeting's about.
I'm sorry, I
This is quadrant one that we should be talking about tonight. That's next week's meeting, correct? So if you're interested for next week, you should go to next week's meeting.
So, yes, thank you. Other question?
Yeah, so one of the things you had up there, you were worried about flooding overlapping roads.
Yes.
So what about the flooding that overlaps our property because of the drainage system that they planned in Caruth Estates is faulty? It's not working. They put flumes in, right, to drain the water underneath 407 into Lantana.
Right.
For some reason, the water doesn't understand to take a left-hand turn. And it runs right into the property of 4 of us that are on that side of the road.
So you're in
East Caruth.
407.
407,
Yeah.
Caruth Estates.
Right up front.
Yes.
And I don't know if anybody did any studies there, but there's dangerous flooding back there to the point where the ducks just flow right down through the backyards. And if there's little kids out there, somebody's going to get hurt one of these days. So I don't know if that was part of your study. I've got pictures if you need to see it. I've got backyard fences that got knocked down because of the pressure of the water trying to get to under 407. So I was just wondering, are you worried about that or just the flooding on the roads?
Well, to answer the question, it's, we're worried about the flooding. I'm not trying to give you a point answer.
Yeah.
It's where the water is moving to is what we're trying to get our arms around.
So if it's moving through all our backyards, that doesn't matter?
Well, again, it comes back to some of how the development was done at the time.
Right.
As well.
And it was faulty, right? But the town had to approve it at some point.
You want to talk about what the town does or doesn't?
I was just gonna let y'all do it.
You weren't getting out here.
I'm good with that. Okay, so to kind of answer some of the questions. I'm just gonna take it off. Can y'all hear me really good?
We can.
I figured, eat the mic. I figured y'all need to hear that. Okay, so let's just talk about Caruth Estates.
Quadrant 1.
Yeah, Quadrant 1. So it's obvious. I've actually seen some of the video footage. Several of the residents have provided it to me. I've actually physically seen it myself. It does cover a lot of water back there. The traveling path to go towards 407, it's not effective on the concrete path that it's supposed to be taking, but it's a tiny little path. One thing I will state though is we're getting heavier rainfall. I actually said this at the beginning of the year. I want to kind of push this so that you understand this. So the 25-year rain event study that he's taking is being overlaid onto this map. But the water that we're talking about that we're taking on, especially this last year, and I know y'all seen it more than I have. I've only been here for 3 years, so you've seen it a lot more frequent than I have, and I've heard some of the residents tell me this has been the craziest 3 years. I couldn't say anything else because that's actually what I've physically seen, so it's crappy, some of the water that we're watching travel through there. But I will say that the water, it's trying to handle, the landmass is trying to take on as much as it can. This is abnormal rain pattern. I took Denton County's record, and we were already, in the first part of spring, we were already well over what our full rain hold was. So you have to understand that's the reason we have 100-year flood studies, we have 25-year, and then we have so on and so forth. So this year was completely abnormal. We far exceeded in the very early part of the year. That being stated, Caruth Estates did meet the minimum standards when it was developed. I looked at this, I've actually talked to Steve, Steve was actually on at the time whenever we were looking at this and we were talking about that, but there are a lot of things that do impact that. It's like taking the spoon method in the sandbox analogy. I've looked at fences that are in the area. I'm not saying this is at everybody's property, so it's just an analogy, so don't shoot the messenger here, but this is something I've physically seen. I've been out to several properties. Fence bottoms are no longer there. When it was developed, it wasn't like that. You used to have a 4-inch gap below the fence, maybe 2-inch. I've seen a lot of grass patterns and dirt and sediment that's built up so high over the years, over maybe a 20-year period, granted, for those who have lived there for a while or during the development.
Yeah,
There are those that have told me that, yeah, I'm just telling you based off of the residents, okay. But either way, what I am saying is, the bottom rung of these ornamental metal fences aren't even covered. Like the bottom support on the structures for the fences, they're not even there anymore. Some of that stuff actually does impact how your drainage flow is. Your yard goes flat because you no longer maintain the drainage back there, it's going to impact it. That's some of the stuff that we talked about in the paperwork and some of the stuff that we're talking about as far as maintenance. Now, does that impact it on a major large scale? Yes and no. Yes, it can impact it, and if everybody's maintaining it, then it helps move the water quicker down towards 407. But that doesn't mean during a huge rain event that it's not going to impact you at a greater effect, because it can only handle so much. The drainage flow that it was intended for is your normal rain flow, not your heavy events. That's how they build those. That's how they build design standards. They don't build it over, hurricane strength unless you live in Florida. And then, of course, then that's exactly what you get impacted with, and that's how they design it. But you have to understand that's how it's designed. I don't know if that's answering your question directly, but I'm just trying to put that out there that we do realize that Crew of the States, as an example, has more water than normal. But we also have seen a lot of changes in the last 3 years in that area.
Not better though.
What's
This
that
has been going on for 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And killing trees, right? Because they get saturated with water, and then the land gets so soft, they get uprooted, right?
Correct.
And it doesn't need to be a major event. It just needs to be a heavy rain.
And to speak to your point, a lot of times I usually get calls, and one of the questions that usually comes up is, it stopped raining 2 weeks ago, but I'm still seeing water. Well, there's saturation in the soil, and depending on the type of soil composition that you have, it could take weeks for the water to completely dissipate, especially if it's flowing from the top hill and you happen to be at the bottom. You may not see that change in that effect for a month, depending on how much water we've taken on. And it's slowly moving through the soil. You don't see it top of the ground, you just feel it. It's soft, it's super mushy. And in this case, in Crew of the States at 407, the way that it looks and the way that I've seen it, I physically have seen it myself. I've gone out there 2 months afterwards, and I've actually seen water still sitting in the tributary that's right there that travels the water out. Now, granted, some people water their grass still right after the rain event because it's on a schedule, okay? Not really needed, but at the same time, people set their systems off and they go and take vacation. That water's still traveling, but there is still some holding water. It takes a long time for that to dissipate, especially at a flatter level like that. It's not like you're sitting on top of the hill. You may have someone who's sitting on the top of Taylor Oaks, and then you have someone at the bottom. They're catching everybody's water from the top of the hill, and eventually they're going to dry out, but not as quick as the person at the top of the hill.
Yeah, and I'm not worried about it sitting there for days or weeks. The system was built to drain that water out under 407, and the percentage of the flumes, like the depth, like it's supposed to go downhill.
Yes, sir.
It gets halfway, and it's not going, it's going uphill. And so it comes off into the backyards. And then the back flume is not big enough to hold the water, so the water goes through 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 properties right through the middle of the backyard, because those flumes were built faulty. They don't go downhill, they go parallel to the ground.
As opposed to tapering off in an effective
Right, exactly. And the one that goes from underneath East Caruth, and it's supposed to flow west and then take a right-hand turn, it gets halfway and it stops flowing because the grade is at the wrong percentage. And we've had it studied too. And at one point it goes uphill.
Nikki, is the culvert under 407, it's not low enough?
It finally got lower when they redid the street, right? But before that, it would just sit there forever.
And that's actually what I was told as well previously, because to my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but to my understanding, it was far worse before they redid it. And now it's better than it was, but at this point, you're stating it's still not dissipating enough water fast enough that it's swelling out past it.
And it eventually goes, right? But it's right through our backyards.
But that flume hardly ever, it has to be dry for a long time for there to not be water in that.
It grows moss.
Yes.
And so to be clear, that's exactly what this study is indicating. Okay, and that's exactly what this study is for. The point of it is, and just to kind of circle everything back, and I'm not disagreeing with y'all, I agree with y'all 100% on what you're stating, just to be clear. The 2007 study was completely different than the one that we needed now, because there is a vast difference between what happened in 2007 and what's happening now. Taylor Oaks was developed, Thornhill Estates was developed, a lot of these places, and then now you have the Vickery. And I know I'm not going to harp on the Vickery, but I'm going to say we have a lot of development that's going on around us, and properties change over 20 to 30 years. I'm not saying everybody's not digging out channels, but not everybody's cleaning out their grade, and typically it has to be looked at, because here it's not like we have a stormwater sewer system that's in place, where the public works department would constantly keep an eye on it, they would go out and dig the grade, or they would change something, or if a pipe was defective, we would maintain it. That doesn't exist. It's just property owners and property maintenance, and that's really what our ordinance points towards as well. It basically puts all the onus back on the owners except for a pipe crossing underneath the road, which the town has responsibility, which is what's indicated in the paperwork that was put together as well, which we may need to change the structure of our ordinances, and that's one thing that we need to talk about heavily, about how we need to enforce it, or what changes need to happen, and we need input from the residents so that we can start designing that so that we can have the greatest impact. But this study does indicate the exact same thing that you're echoing right now, just to be clear. It's showing, I mean, I'm going to walk over there. I don't think it's Coral Reach. I can speak loud enough, but anyways, that's what this is showing. It's showing that same pattern, almost up to where the houses are existing, which is why the green structures in that study is saying, hey, there's potential flooding that could occur on these structures that are right there. This actually shows that. It's echoing your sentiment. I've seen the videos. I've seen the water's halfway across. They're 1 acre lots. Half of it was absorbed in water during the rain, to the point where I've actually seen some of y'all's legs. It's more than I want to see, but anyways, some of it was up to the kneecap. It was that far up. So I just want you to know that's what this study's indicating. That's why we're talking about this and what improvements need to take place and what can the town do to get the greatest impact, and what are we willing to take on financially in order to do that.
So, and does this study include, you know where the horse stables are?
It does.
And there's a pond there.
That's correct.
And that pond ends up sending water into our neighborhood.
It does at some point.
Ours too. It
sends
it into the Oaks as well.
Right, but I will say this, and it's not everyone's favorite thing when I say it, but I am going to say this. So the pond that exists there was there prior. It's not something that's new. It wasn't developed after Caruth Estates. It was there long before. There is a spillway that exists on it, and there is water that comes from that property because it's the higher level, just like anybody who's in Double Oak is at the high level. It is intended to drain in to Caruth Estates, 100%. I've looked at individual property maps, those who live directly impacted by it. I've looked at it till I'm probably blue in the face. And I've looked at every one of them. A lot of those property owners who are directly impacted by that have more drainage easements on their property than your standard homeowner. They usually have 4. They have a pathway that goes across the back, 2 that go down the sides, and 1 that crosses out through the front, so it takes it out towards 407. So anybody who's...
And then through our backyard.
Correct. So, not wrong, but at the end of the day, that was the intended design, and that's the way that the pathway was taken forward.
There is also drainage pipes from that pond that go downhill into those people's backyard. We've sat there and watched the water, like a waterfall, go straight down, and he's got pipes in there that drain his runoff into those people's backyard.
So I'm going to tell you this, and I'll indicate with this. And I've seen the size of the pipe that's on it. It's not a major pipe. It's not like a 4 or 5 inch pipe. Okay. If someone decides in Double Oak that they wanted to, and I'm going to use this as an example. I know that's a bigger property, but I'm going to use this as an example. If you decide at your home that you want to install French drains and you want to pipe every bit of your roof underlying water because it's eroding around your soil base, and you say, hey, I'm going to take my gutter downspouts and I'm going to take it out to the drainage easement, and that's where I'm going to direct it. That is no different than what the developer has done over on that side, the property owner has done on that side. There is not a permit for that. There is no requirement. Nothing by code under the ICC, which is what we're under. I've looked at it. The state has no mandate on that. You're allowed to install French drain pipes on your property to move water through it effectively. Doesn't mean that you can't wash out your neighbor, but that is the intended location for that water to take place. It's not sitting right on the fence line and dumping right into that person's property. I've driven it already 3 times and looked at it. I looked at it during the dry time, looked during the wet season. And it does come out that pipe. But it is no different than if it moves off of the property. He has the right to dissipate that water downhill. That's where it's supposed to go. Ultimately, it ends up there no matter what. They have the right to do that. It's no different than you putting it under your drainage easement. That's where he's placed it.
So we can't put a stoppage on the pipe?
No, because I don't own the property. And I can't, and the town's not gonna go and seek that property owner out to tell them anything, because we don't have a code that states that you can't do that. It's perfectly allowable. I do understand the issue, and there's a lot of elevation changes at those property owners' properties. I've looked at them. I've walked all or I think it's about 5 properties in total. Along that fence line, there's no way that's the same elevation it was whenever it was started out. I've looked at it. The fences that I was telling you about, that often where it has the bottom rung support that's on there, it's swallowed up in sediment. Everybody's got to clear that out. It's got to go back to the way it was intended on the drainage easement that lies in that field. But nobody really looks at that. They only just see the water that's coming across and they go, hey, stop your water, get it off of my property. Everybody feels that. I get it. But everyone's going to have to take responsibility at the end of the day, and each property owner is going to have to assess that. They're going to have to start making effective changes. Your property wasn't the same way it was 20 or 30 years ago. You've got to do something about it. These larger impacts that we're talking about on here, there are some resolutions that are on here that are going to cost money. But these are large fixes. The minor fixes that are usually happening, I'm not saying minor as in it doesn't affect you in a major way. So please don't take that as like I'm saying you have minor issues. There are some things that property owners can do to stop the issues that are occurring between neighbors. And at the end of the day, some drainage is going to have to be cleaned out on the properties and brought back to what the original survey was. And I've talked to a lot of homeowners about that, and I say, hey, you can get a hold of your property survey. I always, just to kind of echo what Pat was talking about earlier. I see a lot of drainage easements on properties, but I see a lot of stuff that's in them, and it looks about as flat as a board can be. And if I probably shot water on it, it would just hold water rather than take it away like it's supposed to. And then I get the original development studies. On older ones, it's a little bit harder and double up. But I have found several, and the water pattern will just show it just shooting straight across property. I take it to the owner and I go, look, this is what it's supposed to be doing. And then it becomes frustrating for them because at the end of the day, they're like, well, what can I do? And I said, well, you can disperse the water flow on your property, but you can't impede your neighbor and impact them under a major event, but you can put drains effectively. I've got people who've put up berms. I have a lot of things that people have done to make changes to it, to try to effectively move the water in the direction it was intended to go. But as soon as you do that, then the next person goes, well, now I've got the issue. And that's what's going to keep happening.
Well, that is the problem. So I'm on I guess the east side of Simmons. It's a bowl all the way down, and if you follow that map, it never stays. The update on Simmons Road has been better, but it doesn't stay in Simmons Road, and it's causing on both sides of the road effect because there's a natural swale based on the way that the terrain is built. Yeah, I would love to put a culvert in the back of my yard to keep it from spreading out for my entire yard. But yeah, then I'm going to be impeding my downstream neighbor, and that's going to cause problems for him. But I mean, we've all talked about it. It'd be great if somebody had a backhoe and said, "Hey, we're going to help you, and we're going to build a culvert." But then I guess that goes back to the city. So one thing I've asked is, so we're going to be looking at expense here. Do we own any construction equipment, or is this all going to be contracted out? So at what point do we save money and buy a backhoe or something?
So I'm gonna let Scott and Patrick talk to you a little bit more about that, about what we can do financially, like what options are in there. It's actually, I believe it's included in the packet as well, correct? Yeah, it's also included in the packet explaining that. No, Double Oak doesn't own equipment. If we had some equipment, you'd see me, because I used to do senior heavy equipment operation for many, many years. If that was the case, I'd be out there cleaning out everyone's culvert. This would be an ended conversation. I'd be moving a lot of water in a lot of different places.
I mean,
unfortunately, Double Oak doesn't.
Well, at some point in time, it's going to save us money by owning something.
Right. Yes, sir.
So you talked a little bit of, there's municipal responsibilities and then there's owner's responsibilities. Does the town currently have the correct ordinances that allow you to inspect property so that we know whether or not all the culverts that are under individual driveways are being maintained to standard? Because each one of those, I have no idea if mine does. I'm like the mayor. I'm sure I'm out of sorts, but sorry, Patrick. I will outsource that. If you tell me who can clean it, I'll outsource it immediately. If you give us a list of vendors and say you need vendors to do the following things and you need to inspect a culvert every 2 years, and you have the tools that you can say, I have spot checked your property and you have a cure notice of 60 days to clean out the culvert under your personal driveway. We're not talking about town, roads, right? So do you have the current ordinance authorities to do that kind of work on behalf of all of the citizens? Okay.
Okay, the straight answer is no. I can explain it all day, but I can tell you the only ordinance that we actually currently have in place is for developments. Okay? They do identify some of the things we would operate under, talking about the 100-year flow, a 3-to-1 ratio for your ditch patterns, which is what should be taking place at all the properties. I guarantee you they were developed with that in mind because you all live on single-family lots. There were bar ditches when they were originally there, whether you were the original homeowner or you bought it later on. I'm telling you, there were bar ditches and they were effective at one point in time. But, yes, ma'am.
Randy, you made a comment earlier about changing ordinances, but you just said that the only ordinances we have has to do with new development, and we're almost developed. So I guess I don't understand what ordinances, I agree with what he said. To make us do something, put an ordinance in place.
And that's what he's pointing at.
Yeah.
We need to develop ordinances. That's actually what's also in this packet. The input we need to get from citizens, and we need to actually either adopt some ordinances or we've already looked at the surrounding towns. Bartonville, Copper Canyon, and Argyle, a lot of the surrounding cities have different ordinances and they all do it completely different. We're looking at all of those and we're trying to find what method is most effective, but then we're gonna have to output that and let y'all know what's going on and where we're at with it, because ultimately it impacts all the residents. Now, at the end of the day, can we put an ordinance in place? Sure. Is it easy to put it on? As long as they vote for it and they get it through, absolutely. But then you gotta turn around and you gotta tell somebody on fixed income, hey, by the way, go spend $2,000 and fix your drainage ditch. And that's not even post fee that you were planning on. Doesn't mean you don't have property maintenance responsibility, but then you start talking about how it impacts people. Yes, you have responsibility to maintain it, but it's gonna cost money. And so, can we put a list together? Sure. But typically with most towns, you don't usually put a list together because there's a liability risk that runs with that. If that person doesn't do what they say they're gonna do, then you come back and point at the city and the city gets sued. So usually I get asked that question a lot. Hey, who do you use? Well, I can't tell you who to use.
But I'm not asking for an approved list. I'm just saying, tell us, these are the type of contractors, look for these kind of qualifications, look for these kind of certifications, look for this kind of bonding requirements.
You guys gave us a list of people who've checked all of our water meters. Why can't we do the same exact thing like that list? So here's 10 people to call.
Yeah.
And then we get a chance to interview the person we want.
So I totally get where you're coming from that, and you're not wrong. But the town of Double Oak didn't put that list together. TCEQ put that list together of licensed vendors who are specified in that field. And they're the ones who take the risk if they decide, if you go back and say, hey, that list you put together, this person didn't end up doing it, they take all the liability and risk. Double Oak did not put that list together, just to be clear. This is the same thing that happens in Irving. So I worked in Irving for over a decade and a half. And every time a water issue would come up or an ordinance and there were a contractor issue came up, they would say, hey, do you have somebody who's a preferred vendor? And I said, sorry. We don't do that. It's a liability and risk. Our attorneys won't even let us give you a list of people that you can utilize because of what it could cause.
So can Scott give us a list?
Y'all do that at half?
If we're passing the buck, there's got to be somebody, if he's counseling us, you'd be able to counsel us on people who we can trust to do that work.
I understand. And I don't disagree with you. I get what you're saying. Yes, sir.
He's been waiting longer.
Yeah.
About the drainage ditches, I live in the Oaks, which is based out of and some of those recently, not last year, but in the last 5 years, were changed from said to concrete.
It saves a lot of money.
I always just wondered if the faster runoff has caused more problems downstream. If the older, more natural drainage wasn't holding the water maybe a little longer and reducing the rush of water.
So,
it's not, it doesn't impact me. I just wonder about.
So that's actually a really great question. I'm going to repeat it just for those who couldn't hear it in the back. So what he's essentially stating is, in the Oaks, there were a lot of changes to culverts. They went from a natural culvert in some areas to concrete, RCP, so reinforced concrete pipe. channels with head walls, and the water started moving. And so he's stating, well, I wonder if that didn't impact us at the faster rate impacting other residents. The answer is, well, yeah, it does. Anytime you change it, that's what ends up happening. That's why typically, and you can echo this, Scott, this is something we've talked about actually back and forth, and the same thing with Patrick. When you typically take a major project, you're going to start at the southern portion of it, because those are the ones who are going to get impacted the most, and then move uphill with that project. The uphill is going to feel the effects of the changes downstream, because the water is going to dissipate quicker, which draws the water away from what's up north. And as you make your way uphill, then the improvements are made. As opposed to if you make an improvement on the top of the hill, you're just slamming the people at the bottom hill even quicker. And so there, in some cases, that's usually how it's done.
Yeah, it's very common, yes. When you do a multi-phase improvement project, you definitely start at the downstream end because you want to have somewhere for that water to go. And then you just work your way up. Yeah.
Well, yes, sir.
I forgot what I was going to say, but ordinances, I didn't see anything on the list about rain barrels. Is that even something to consider? And a second question.
So rain barrels. Yes, you can do rain barrels on your property. You can disperse water into, are you talking about like from the gutters of your house?
From your non-permeable.
Yeah, so you can, yes.
Okay. But
you can
collect
collect
as far as
water.
making an ordinance, that wouldn't be something the town would want to get into.
Yeah, no, not typically.
Okay, and the other question is, 10, 12 years ago, my neighbor and I got together and built our own detention pond, I guess you call it, or area. And we talked to Charlie Wright, whatever his name was, and he said, as long as you don't hold water, as long as it's not a retention pond, do whatever you want in the easement. Does that offer still stand?
I would need to see it before I'll agree to it. Because, let me say it like this with permits, the same, no different than with any permit. A lot of times people will say one thing and then do another. I need to see the plan so that I can review it and approve it.
Okay.
It's not the first time that it's happened though. There are other residents who have done the same thing.
We did it, and it lasted about 7 years, and what's it called, scarped out or whatever, under around the park. We didn't do it good enough, but it helped our neighbors downstream for a while, and so we wanted to do it again.
Hence the reason that typically whenever you're doing that, it needs to be done a certain way. You need to bring in certain soil types that are more clay or less porous so that it's actually holding the water in some cases and then moving the water out afterwards. And in some cases, depending on how porous you get it, will absorb but not too quickly. There's a lot that goes into this. That's why whenever someone says typically, well, can I dig a hole in the backyard and just start holding water back there? Well, that sounds really great in theory, but we actually need to know what you're putting in because you're going to impact your neighbor whenever you do that, whenever it starts holding water on a consistent basis because it actually releases no water, and then all of a sudden a flood hits, and now all of a sudden you've already got water, and now it's just spilling at your neighbor. So there are retention ponds, and that's another really good point. And those who are in quadrant 1 can echo this to a certain extent. I can tell you this: I've talked to Taylor Oaks, and I asked the question, when's the last time you dredged this thing? Because you're supposed to at some point. But Double Oak doesn't own them, and we don't have an ordinance that says you must do it. But the actual development there actually owns it. It has to be dredged at some point because silt does come in. You can't control everything. And eventually it builds up, and the water level rises, and then it comes up to the pipe, and then it blocks the pipe, which is exactly what's happening on a smaller scale with most residents. The question came up earlier about culverts. Do we have ordinances for block culverts? No, we don't. We do need one because I see them all the time. They're usually about 75% to 80% blocked, and it does impact. It does impact neighbors. And when water can't get through, it finds another way top level, and the next thing you know, your neighbor's adopting your water because no one's actually maintaining the bar ditch that's in front of their house or the drainage area that they have on their property that's called out on their easements, on their plat, or their land survey. So I just want to say that too, just to kind of point towards that.
Right here, though, it says that y'all have an ordinance for that on page 15.
It's referencing part of the ordinance of the
development.
The development.
Yeah.
So even if it's a citizen's responsibility, it's not every homeowner, that's not included by that?
If you look at the beginning part of the ordinance, where it actually starts, not just the clip that it's taken from, but actually the start of it, it's talking about the development standards for the new builds is what it's talking about. Doesn't mean that it doesn't fit all the properties, because there's a lot of verbiage that's typically used in that, but we need to mandate it where it does say all properties. I'm not disagreeing with you on that. and there is a responsibility that they have to do to maintain it, but it doesn't call it out right directly because it comes under the development standards for when you're developing a property, and it gives the floodway and the pattern of how to develop it.
So when it says that they are responsible for maintaining drainage ditches on their properties, that's in the drainage easements, whatever.
It's under the development standard, which is whenever they're doing a development. That's
So
what
they're
it's
not
talking
actually
about.
maintaining it forever, just during the.
During the build and then going forward. So say like if you built, okay, let me just say it like this. This may help a little bit. So say like somebody wanted to come into Double Oak and they want to build a development. That's the standard that they have to follow. Patrick was actually saying this earlier. We have newer ordinances and older properties. I can't skip over to someone's property and go, by the way, this was put in 2007 and you were here in 1998 and you need to fix it to this level. But if you do make an improvement on the property, this happens a lot. Now, I get a lot of people who they come in and they say, hey, I'm going to change the culvert under my driveway. I have a 12-inch pipe, and this is what we're going to do, and they send it over to me, and I go, yeah, you can't do that anymore. Our ordinance states that you got to have an 18-inch reinforced concrete pipe, and while I'm there, I tell them, by the way, you need to clear it in daylight out because it can't hold water, which impacts mosquitoes or drainage issues. And you need to daylight this and have a contractor clean out your culvert in front or your drainage area, which is usually typically in the front. I'm not saying it's in every case. And then you need to fix it according to that. That's the new way. So if you pull a permit and you're making improvements on your property, then I'm going to have you adhere to what the code is now, not retrofitting an old property and coming back to you and going, by the way, I was looking at your property, you need to fix it. It sucks.
So does that include, it's like, I'm in the Oaks as well, when you take a walk on that hill, tons of them, the driveway,
Yes.
yeah, you see like this much space for water to flow because the dirt, so if they have, or some are even like, the one across from me is
Yeah.
collapsing.
Mhm.
So if they replace that because it's collapsing, you're saying it has to be the 18-inch concrete.
Yes, at minimum, and it can't, and there's more to it than that, but starting at 18 inches. Now, if you have a pipe, if your pipe's smaller at your property, and I'm not trying to get into the weeds because we'll talk about this all night long, but if you're at the bottom and then your neighbor has a different size pipe, you have to maintain at the same size pipe or larger for the flow. Okay, you can't just stick in a bunch of tiny pipes on your property because you're at the end of it, because what ends up happening is it impacts everybody from the bottom all the way up because it can't get through effectively. So and that's actually in that development standard as well. So this is typically what ends up happening with those. It retrofits new improvements, not those that were existing before it. So a lot of people call it grandfathered. The real name and terminology for it is pre-existing non-conforming, which means it was legally put in at the time, the way that the standards were allowable at the time, and now it just doesn't meet the standard anymore, but I can't make you go back and do it, which is the reason we need an ordinance that clarifies it, gives a certain amount of time for people to reasonably make progress, and for us to be able to enforce it going forward. And what does that effectively look like? That's why we need to have these talks. So that's more of a maintenance standard, okay?
So if you're going to do that, if you're going to consider a new ordinance that redefines the town's drainage requirements, and you're going to put new standards in, but you're going to go property to property and survey them?
That is a good question, and that's something that we've talked about. But it needs to be effective, and it needs to be implemented, and everybody needs to be able to buy in on that. Does that make sense?
Well, if you do it,
the
only way that you know that people buy in,
Yes.
you don't tell them what they have to do.
Well, it will be clarified if we decide to go that path, which is something that we would like to do. Then it will be identified. It will be very clear as to what it is and the expected time frame for it to be put into compliance in the case that we go that route. I can't definitively tell you that because we don't have that right now in front of us. But I do get your question.
So
Yes.
if we go back to Caruth Estates.
Yes, ma'am.
You've recognized and agreed that there's a problem, right? You admitted that. But we don't see in this recommendations anything for Caruth. Is that correct?
So that's just a highlighted overview for some things that could possibly, so there's a more in-depth, and I'll let Pat kind of speak a little bit more about what's in the packet, but did Caruth Estates get put in there as far as a correction for it?
We don't have anything right now.
No, it's not. And so, okay, so the answer is no, and that's what this meeting's for.
Okay.
That it's also to identify, not that we don't know that there are not issues there, but what are the impacts and what are solutions? And we decide that there's enough of it and there's enough conversation going that direction, then maybe what we do is we talk to HAF and say, hey, we need to include this in there. What could some possible resolutions look like? And then we can include that in a study and find out how much it would cost to alleviate that issue and what are some possible solutions.
Yeah, it's
that's exactly what this is for.
For return on investment, it's probably the best bang for the buck because you're mainly trying to get that water flowing underneath 407 quicker, right?
Yes, ma'am. I agree.
Okay.
Yes.
But to echo his sentiments, this is the start.
Exactly, right.
When I think every correspondence I put out in the town, I use the word marathon. This is the beginning of a marathon. We think it's that important that we need to start acting upon it. Our new town administrator, Chris, been sitting in the back, met with with the ordinance committee today or yesterday?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. So we're looking for all of this feedback from these 4 meetings to begin to put an outline together. And I say an outline, not of, I'm going to come fix your solution, but in general of what we need to do to tackle this, and then bring it back to the public again to make sure we got it right, so that we can go do things that are going to impact us all in the best positive manner we can. Does it mean you're all going to incur some expense to fix these things? Yes. Is there going to be expense incurred by the town? Yes. We're in the process of identifying the town's responsibility out of this study, and we're going to start to talk about that as a council with our engineers as to where we need to go. You said you identified what, 25?
25 culverts?
Cross culverts? They're out here? We have way more than that. Next step we're going to do is we're going to find all of them. We're going to find all the cross culverts. Because guess what? Those the town needs to look at and possibly do something with.
So you just said that you're looking at getting some ordinance changes in the city so that then the city can help each one of, politely speaking, encourage us as residents here to fix our own stuff. If we all fixed our own stuff, some of the bigger city issues might be a little smaller because we've all opened our channels to let the water flow and get out of here, but we have no ordinances to force that right now. And I understand if some old lady, anybody, is on a limited income, they've got a problem, but if we don't have the person downhill from them fix their issue and that limited income family now floods because we didn't open up the drainage, it's worse than fixing a drainage ditch.
Well, and let me say this, and when I say that, and when I stated that earlier, one of the things I was prefacing with is finding reasonable timeframes for people to bring it into compliance that's reasonable. Correct. It doesn't mean avoiding fixing the issue just because you're on a limited income, but it's saying, hey, listen, we understand this is going to cost money over time. Here's some solutions, and here's a time frame to bring it into compliance. And I'm not saying it's going to be one of those things where the town goes, hey, we just put this ordinance in place. You have 3 months now to fix it. And we're going to go through each one, kind of like when we were dealing with the TCEQ water issue, which we had no control over. And they were like, if we give you the letter and you don't fix it, we're going to start fining you within such a time period, within less than a year. So, yes, sir.
Okay, I have a question. You're talking about these ordinances related to development. So there's 25 empty acres at the corner of 407 and 407 and Simmons. What role do you, the city or you folks take in preventing hydrology issues for those properties below it?
So that's a really great question. So whenever that does come up, it'll take both our engineer and their engineers coming together with some solution that doesn't impact them. That will heavily be considered whenever that takes place and the development goes in there. That will not impact those residents that are surrounding it in a way that it's effectively moved away from that property.
Well, and what kind of assurance might there be given what's happened with Hickory?
So we didn't have, well, I can tell you this personally. I didn't have any input with that. It was before I took place. Had I been here, there would have been conversations. But someone still has rights to develop and meet minimum standards, even though, and for lack of better words, and I apologize if this is taken differently, and it's not my intention, but it screws other people, right? Okay, let's just say it like it is. At the end of the day, all they have to do is meet minimum compliance standards. Well, that's what they meant. Doesn't mean that there hasn't been changes since then. We don't know what those impacts have been since then, but when it originally was developed, to kind of echo and to kind of back up what Scott's saying, when he takes the study, he's taking the study based off of the good faith gesture of what was actually designed, what was approved, and was originally done and done correctly.
The difference here is that that property is in Double Oak.
Correct.
As opposed to Copper Canyon.
And that's where we would have.
Yes.
We'll have a lot of oversight. Trust me when I say there'll be a lot of oversight on that piece of property. And the other part of that too is that because this has the potential to become our last bastion of retail for the town of Double Oak. So what you're going to see happen here with this development is you're going to have sewer system and stormwater that's going to have to be carried down here, across the road, into this street here, and carried off into the TECQ watershed. So this isn't going to be one of those natural things over here because they've got to disperse it from a sewage perspective and from a water perspective. So this, unlike, or just like this, how many people know that we actually have we're hooked up to a sewer system over here?
Right.
This will be the second part of the town that's hooked up to a sewer system. And that has to happen with the development. And believe me, we're already having those conversations with the owners and the developers that you don't have a choice.
So I'm going to catch you and then I'm going to go to you right next, okay?
So just talking about stuff flowing downhill, eventually we hit a bottleneck, right? So we've been talking about Screw Estates. I live there, so I'm slightly interested. Is this simple as if we enlarge, I think culvert's the right word, pipe, whatever, underneath 407, do we have the capacity on the north side that we're allowed to just dump water in there and we're good? Or
Well,
is that going to continue to be a problem?
That's going to have to be a conversation that's taking place. If that's the solution that's proposed, should we go back and look at that? And that's what we end up moving forward with, then yes. Then what will end up having to take place is we can't dump just because we want to. We would need to go back to them and let them know that the flow rates are going to change. This is how it's going to impact, and we're going to have to come to some kind of agreement.
Do we even know if the flow rate is what we said? I mean, based on the discussion, we have no idea if the flow rate out of the one development coming to what's
From Carruth Estates over to Lantana and on the side of 407?
Yeah, that one there, but the other development.
Vickery.
We're working off of what people have based on their estimate.
On their original design.
Right, I mean, we have reality today.
Correct.
Any way you can actually say, your estimate said you were going to flow X amount of volume per hour or whatever, and you're actually flowing this.
So yes, we can take a look at that. We just have to pay for that study to be done, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't do that.
This homeowners, this bond association, they are on top of that. I talk to Chip and I talk to those folks on a pretty regular basis. In fact, I look forward to them coming to Tuesday because I think it's going to be interesting to see what they learn. We're not always on top of it, but I know they are.
Just to finish the question, too. So timing, I heard the word marathon. So we're looking at, for the whole city, right, all of us together, what makes sense, what kind of plan, who's going to pay for what, like how are we going to figure this all out together. Just ballpark timing on what is this going to look like over the next 6 months, 18 months? Like at what point would we say, all right, here's some proposals, here's some fixes, what are we going to talk about?
So I can say, I'm going to talk about the first thing that could change that probably would be impacted the quickest. And I say quickest doesn't, like it's not going to be quick, it's not going to be the fastest fix, but it could start the quickest. It's going to be ordinance changes with impacts to homeowners. I'm going to be honest with you, that's the quickest solution. These projects cost millions of dollars, and we're not even adding in the Carruth Estates review now at this point of what would be a solution for that. And then the town has to decide, well, how are we going to bring this to a resolution and be able to be cost effective, because this is going to affect your pocket. Because somehow the town has to pay for it. And the project, what was the total for the whole thing?
$54 million.
$54 million for all the projects to be completed. So let's just be clear, it's a lot of money for major improvements.
You guys put a price on this already?
They had to. For the improvements specifically for the ones that they found that were the major issues. Now that doesn't have anything to do with whether or not adding Carruth Estates now into that mix will be additional dollars, and we'll find out exactly what it would cost to fix that based off of different solutions that they identified.
Well, a couple things here. I'm back to my backhoe.
Yes, sir.
comment. I mean, seriously, we've got water that we don't have a well-defined channel where water can go and move down through people's backyards, front yards, wherever,
Yes.
right? So this simple fix, not it's going to solve everything, but if we can control that water, even with a natural culvert, I'm not talking pipe or anything, just really just kind of go through and hit some backyards and control that water flow. I think that would help a lot. I know in my backyard, I'm looking at this and it says 1.5 to 2 feet. I got 3 feet in the back of my yard with white water, and I've got videos of my girls with pool floats going one side of my yard to the other, and it's an acre. It's a lot of water that runs back there. So, but the other thing is, a lot of water still should be in Simmons. They put that giant culvert in the middle of Simmons, and they put these tiny little drains on each side of Simmons, and we've got some block culverts, and I just don't think that thing's adequate. I mean, it's helped a little bit, but it's still not efficient. So Simmons, I believe, is a county road, and as well as King. So will we be able to get some county assistance?
Yes, and I say yes as in we need to look at that and we need to determine that and ultimately go back to them and say, hey, is there possible funding, which is something we've also talked about.
I'd like to call a quick timeout because I want to make sure that the people who signed up are heard from. Gordon, we've heard from you.
I got my answers, please.
Ken Day. You good? Okay. Ramiro Sanchez.
I'm good.
You sure? Okay. Bill Lundgren.
I made my backhoe comment. I'm good.
I thought that was you.
Me and you think alike. We're gonna have to get together and talk.
So no, I just wanted to call time out there because this is. So I want to say one thing right now, and this is great. This is why we broke it up into quadrants. We just identified we need to look at Kruth Estates. I will be writing a formal letter to Hafford Associates to say I would like you to go back, just like we did with Vickery and a few of these other places, and I'll have them get an estimate of what it will take for them to go and do the exact same thing for Kruth Estates. We need to do it. We hear you, and we're going to do it. Okay? So we'll get the formal letter out. Chris, you can help me with it.
So just
we will look at Kruth Estates.
So just real quick, I do want to point out one thing. When you do come up and look at this map, I know that there's like a mellow yellow look that's going on. You can call it yellow and you can call it orange. There's probably going to be the difference between a guy's eye and a woman's eye because we seem to have that dispute. It's true. I'm going to call it fact. But there is a bright yellow one. Those are the improvement areas that HAF is identifying, whether it's by underground travel of piping or above ground, correct?
All the yellow lines you'll see, those are all storm drains underground.
Okay.
And just to make you aware, those are conceptual looks at where those go. These aren't like fully designed improvements yet. This is just, if we did this, this is what we could see.
So I just wanted to make sure that y'all understood what was on that map. That yellow line that's actually in there, those are improvement areas as far as underground piping. Yes, sir.
The portfolio includes the purple boxes and the yellow lines throughout the town.
It would include
the red boxes that you see for the detention improvements, and both of those wouldn't necessarily have to be done. It would just be likely one or the other. So that number could go down. But it's 55 for the 2 red ponds you see, and then all the yellow pipe that you see.
Selfishly, I worry about listening to Dr. because I live at just north of Stag's Leap, and that river, the seasonal river between you and my neighbor. We've got a big box culvert, and we get about, we've got the highest I've ever seen, about 6 inches from the top of the culvert. So something like that is included in that.
I'm not sure exactly where you are, but
yeah. I believe it is, but we'll double check on it. I believe it is.
So are you looking at fixing those quadrants in the whatever pink boxes, or everything upstream that's causing problems to that?
The pink boxes.
the pink boxes were intended to identify potential flooding hotspot areas. It doesn't mean that we came up with an improvement for everyone. We were tasked with coming up with a certain number of them, and that's where Mayor Johnson's saying if we need to look at additional ones, he's talking about looking at additional areas.
But are you just looking in that vicinity, or are you going upstream? Because I mean, looking at like number 6, that's because Simmons isn't holding the water.
Right.
So that's all of Simmons. If you fix that, then you won't have 6. Okay.
I don't know where 6 is, I'm sorry.
It's at the end of Simmons and dumps on the Kings.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, sorry.
So we're gonna have some interesting conversation when it comes to Willow Creek. Somebody, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did I understand that the city is responsible for taking care of the culverts that go underneath city streets?
That's correct.
And so I live on Willow Oak Court in the Oak section. And at the corner of Willow Oak Court and Oak Trail, there's a culvert that's just been demolished by probably a dump truck for sure.
I would like to take ownership. We were building a shop and we actually reported it to the town and never heard back. Our truck driver did it. So we did report it.
Okay. So that's what we need. That's what we need. I mean, I can send Randall all over town and he can get out a little stick and he can poke in the grass. Because he said it earlier, some of these things are buried in the grass now. They've been silted in. We found one, when we had that last massive rainstorm, I got a phone call like 4:30 in the morning, so I went out and drove around. And I'm sitting there looking at this and go, that grass is just eating all that water. It's amazing. And then I look over here and it's like, well, there's a cross culvert here. You couldn't, if you walked up on it during the day, you would not know there was a cross culvert there.
Well, the buttress on this culvert has been broken off and is blocking the culvert itself.
So we want to know that information.
I'll give it to you.
So I will tell you this. I actually already have. So I will say this. I actually already have that information. She's not wrong. I've already received 2 quotes. It's got to go before council for the improvement for that. I've actually looked at something a little bit more extensive beyond what's there because the design that was there was ineffective. I'm gonna say it like that.
Yep.
So I am aware of it though. Yes.
I watched it on another 18-wheeler pop a tire.
Yeah.
Trying to
Actually-
I got out there and stop.
So it originally had, just to be clear, it originally had 1 quote and somebody struck it again and then it got another quote, so.
First one correct.
Yeah, they took care of it really well the next time. Yes, sir.
So on Simmons, on the west side, there are those large storm drain.
4-part inlets?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Whose responsibility is it to make sure that those are cleaned up?
So I can free debris from it, but if it's overgrown or it's not maintained in front of a person's property, it falls back to the property owner. I've freed up debris from inlets before, and I'll take it out. That's not a
I
problem.
mean, there's a number of throughout Simmons that have a lot of debris collected on them. But like, obviously leaves are getting inside of there.
Mhm.
They clog it all up. They're
Mhm.
manholes. Like,
Which-
who gets in there and cleans all that out?
Well, technically, it's a county road, so the citizens only own up to the telephone pole. And the city or the county owns the road and the culverts.
So in some cases, not all cases. If you look at a person's plat, it really identifies it for you because I have a lot of people who usually make that claim until I come out and then I go to their survey and I go, well, it says you own to the middle of the road. And we'll maintain the road, but you have responsibility.
Are you sure?
I didn't say in all cases.
Okay, well, Simmons.
Yeah,
was a
I don't
county
want
road.
to, I
That
just
was,
don't want to blanket all of Simmons with that comment. That's what I want to be real careful with because there are some areas that they may have bought rights to, but it doesn't necessarily mean when the pavement stops. A lot of times when the pavement stops in some of those areas, that's when the property owner assumes responsibility because the town doesn't go out and mow those areas and they don't clean out the culverts in the areas or the national bar ditch. That's actually left to the homeowner. No different than between the sidewalk and the curb in Flower Mound. Flower Mound doesn't go mow that. And if you jack it up, they're gonna come and tell you you need to fix it because they have ordinances. But we need the ordinance that says, hey, if you mess it up here in Double Oak, you need to fix it. But yes, do leaves get in there? Sure, they do. And no, we don't have the equipment to go blow out that culvert, but generally during a heavy rain event, it polishes that off real well. It flushes it out. But that doesn't mean that downstream it's not getting adopted by everybody, which is why we actually have a stormwater management plan that's on our website that indicates how property owners are supposed to take care of it. It's not just in ordinances. We also have stormwater management plans that are actually on the website that you can actually look at. They're in our 5-year plan. It talks about homeowners maintaining debris, leaves, keeping your property from being eroded to the point where it's just dirt. You need to have sod. You need to have something in place to allow the water to absorb and not just wash out your wash up all your property and then basically give it to your neighbor, and your neighbor now has an issue because now they've got mud sitting up against the side of their house. So we do have stuff that's actually out there. A lot of people don't look at it, or like most of us when we go home, we don't want to read ordinances. We don't want to read the city website to figure out what's going on. We only look at it whenever there's a problem. Yes, sir. I know you've been holding up your hand.
That's all right. Question kind of leading to a comment. Am I correct in understanding one of the more immediate fixes may be in the form of ordinance? And basically, we're responsible for our own park. And, I've got silts in parts and erosion in other parts, and I'm maybe not fun of you, but I'm out there digging and backcountry and doing whatever, it's pretty cheap to get somebody to come break. But if it can work in our little corner of Peru, we'd have to shoot a line from one neighbor, the High Point, and, I guess, Chuckles. Nikki, this ultimately affects you. I'm right here in this corner. Now, I'm Mark Green, I'm not going to slide. But I get a tremendous, we'd have to shoot a line from here and pull an even grade through my driveway, through my sidewalk, come across under Ken's driveway, hit the cross culvert. In general, we've got great flow. The problem is if we make it perfect, Mickey, you're out of luck. We're just moving more water down to you.
Mickey, just expand
Clear pool.
Yeah, there we go.
I think everybody, most people here, when we've all said it, we've talked about our concern. We're here because there's something wrong on our property.
Yes. And
okay. But just here's where I see the problem. Let's say we pass an ordinance, okay, you come out and say, hey, dude, your culverts are holding water, but you're eroded over here, you need to fix it. Well, for that to work, I gotta get my neighbor on that side, I gotta get Ken on the other side, and we've all got to do it together and run that drain, or run that grade, not that hard. But when we talk about the big picture, then the number thrown out is 54 million. How much you in for, Mickey, if your backyard?
I can tell you that over a 5-year period, 54 million, each property owner is in for $8,800. You spread it over 10 years, it's $4,400.
Yeah, it's significant. I mean,
it's crazy.
We're going to spend some money. I mean, there's no way around it. And maybe the people in this room that see if, okay, we throw in Carew, throw in another 5 million. Pick a number, call it.
Yeah, what is that number going to be?
Yeah. Not going to hold you to it, but okay, we all say, right, 60 million, yeah, we got to do it. There's a whole bunch of green up there that doesn't have a pink box for anything. Why do those people vote to spend $8,800? What's it do for them? And how do we convince fellow town folks that this is
We'll run our grade their property.
Yeah,
that is an extremely difficult answer that is going to require a tremendous amount of research. I'm not trying to play games. It's mentioned in your packet, and this is happening in most of it's happening in a lot of towns. My business was in Lake Dallas, and every month in my, they bill out of the water company, but I got a separate stormwater usage fee that would come to our property. We had 8 acres. It's $560 a month. $560 a month. We were paying to watch the water rain down on the property and slide into the street, or direct this way and go backwards. You're seeing a lot of municipalities go to stormwater usage fees. Call it a fee, call it a tax, call it whatever you want. And it's based upon the size of the parcel of land. And they figure out rates. Steve Templer my first year on council, came and did a presentation about stormwater usage fees, and we all were aghast that anybody would think about doing that in the town of Double Oak. 3 years later, I'm going, holy crap. Because I actually stood up and said, no, I'm Councilman, no way in heck would we ever do that. And it had nothing to do with me being the mayor, and I'm going, oh boy. Because how do we spend $54 million? The 2007 study, if they did it all, was $957,000. We could have split that up and done it all. But at the time, the amount of money, that was a lot of money. And we're here doing that. So here's the other part. We now have the ability, we have a gentleman that is our town administrator. Chris has experience going after grants and going after things. So once we get all of this information and we start to gather and put our notes together, we're not just going to take it, put it in a file and say, well, that was worth it. No, we're going to go and see what we can feasibly do. But we can do all of this work. And if our citizens don't carry their lots, we're still going to sit here and talk about this and this and this and this and this. We have some major heavy things. By the way, this red box here, we would have to go acquire land from Flower Mound to put that 15-acre lake in. And I'm sure they're going to just say, absolutely. It's free, Double Oak.
Yeah.
And then another piece, and this is coming behind our drainage meetings. They are now releasing engineering dollars for the design of this intersection right here in TRIP 2022. Now, Waketon Road, we all love Waketon Road, right? Did you know Waketon Road was in the 2008 TRIP program? When did it get done? It was 2 years ago? So they can take that long. Now, we don't have to be a part of Kings Road. We can back out at any moment. But the reality is, this is getting developed. It's moving forward in Flower Mound. This intersection is going to be developed. How it goes, what it goes, we have 300 feet of say in that road, as long as they touch this area here. I don't want to mix in Kings Road here for any discussion. What I'm saying is that when we go to look at with our engineering, we're going to incorporate as many drainage pieces into the design of Kings Road. I spoke with Ben Carter and Ben from HAF a week ago on Friday. We had lunch. And it's like, okay, bigger picture. Denton County's starting to release funds. It may be coming your way. I said, okay, we're doing drainage. We're going to get together. We're going to start talking about Kings Road. We've done some surveys and stuff. So the reality is, I'm expecting to try and take a lot of the drainage stuff that's in and around Kings Road, get it into the build if we rebuild Kings Road. That's not decided. I want everybody to know that is not decided. We have the opt-out to not do anything with Kings Road. We are in, which is a good thing because that's estimated to be a $5 to $6 million project. We have a $2 million budget. And Denton County, Judge Eads has a special place in his heart for Double Oak. All right, and so we're going to be working close together with Denton County, with our engineers. But again, that's not for tonight. That's a future discussion. We'll all sit in this room and talk about it. You had something to say, Billy?
Well, I mean, with that being said, with Kings Road and the $54 million, Scott, do you remember how much those boxes roughly, that Kings Road, out of the $54 million, how much is the
two red
Kings
boxes
Road
or
box?
the yellow ones?
Well,
the yellow,
whatever
those down
tallies
yellow
into the 54, how much was the Kings Road?
I have it on my computer. I don't remember the exact.
I was just curious because Kings is in the TRIP 22 plan.
Correct.
If we decide to do it.
Correct.
But that.
So it's a little bit complicated. Like there's portions of the project that are along Kings Road. So when you have the road tore up, now's the time to go in and put in those future improvements, and then you can eventually build onto it. So I think that's what Mayor Johnson's alluding to, that we could kill two birds with one stone, so to speak.
especially in this area right here.
So hopefully some of, if we decide to do things, if, some of that will get
Yes.
caught up in there.
And I specifically asked that question to Ben and to Jim, that how much of this can we tie up if we do this? And I'm saying, folks, as the mayor of the town, I'm saying if, and we can still back out. I don't want people to go, oh, we're committed to it. We got committed to it, but it's all been fixed and we're in good shape, okay? But, guess what? We talked about hurting our neighbors. Flower Mound wants to talk to us about right there. They know funds are getting released from an engineering perspective. They know we have a drainage study going on. They're keenly interested on everything. So literally, it's just a domino effect. And we are trying to organize ourselves to make sure that we don't get Double Oak in any harm's way with either Denton County or Flower Mound. And we don't want to be in harm's way with any of you either. But we'll come back to, we can spend all this money, but if we haven't fixed our bar ditches and our culverts, and then the other thing that I will say is, once we know exactly how many cross culverts we have in this town, we're going to sit down and start prioritizing them. No different than crack seal, no different than mill and overlay. We're going to go into and have culvert projects. Is that correct?
That,
Yes.
that land you said you want to acquire from Flower Mound, is it private land or?
We don't know.
Yeah, I think it is private land.
I'm assuming it is.
So what, you just have to reacquire, like acquire it?
That I couldn't answer. I could not answer.
Could get it and vote on it, it's a private land, you could buy it from the
It's a land acquisition.
You would have to acquire the land, yes.
We can make a park out of it and put some fence around
And it's like property taxes.
I'd be afraid to have that conversation.
The only comment I wanted to make was about the property line. The older parts of town, the property line did go to the middle of the street because the developers were trying to get more houses in. The newer parts of town, the property lines do not go to the street.
Yes.
And because we've done that a lot with the easements.
Right.
When
Yes.
the Board of Adjustments looking into.
Like Taylor Oaks is totally different than
Right,
going up cross timbers. Yeah.
My neighborhood is also, it doesn't go to the middle of the street, but the older parts of town do go to the middle.
Yeah, because I generally get a call like in cross timbers, somebody will be digging in the middle of the asphalt road and it'll be a survey crew. And somebody will be freaking out thinking it's Double Oak and it's not. They're assessing where their actual property line is because the pins actually sit in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
So.
I do want to make a comment about, and I gotta believe because I just love this town. Some of you are going to get proactive and start to go out and possibly do something based upon these conversations to clean your ditches out and stuff. Call 811. Did anybody ever watch Verizon put the fiber in your yard?
Yes.
How many people have cut Verizon with your lawnmower?
Oh, yes.
Because you had your blade down too low.
Yeah.
Please call 811 before you do anything.
Actually, it's Frontier, I think, for most of it.
Well, but it was Verizon when they put it in.
Yeah, that's why they put it in.
Well, let me preface with saying that if you do mow over a Verizon line, you need to fight that because there is a required depth that they're supposed to be meeting. I would document that, and if you do have a question about that, that's what I am here for, and I will help you on that. But just know if it's not, yeah, they usually, especially when your yard is really parched and it's about the time of year whenever they're going out to install the line. If you lay down sod, I've watched them in the previous municipality that I was with. I watched them lift up grass, chunk it under there, and move on. I mean, at the end of the day, it's making money to them. It's not right. They shouldn't do it, but it does happen. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so y'all already answered it, like, all 50 minutes late, I'll back. But, we live on a culvert that's going from 1 to 3, right there. So, I've lost, how much land have I lost because of the water flowing? I mean, before I moved in, they watched all the railroad ties float away. Now my trees are losing all that land. There's so much water, I had a catfish flopping on the concrete like a week and a half after the rain, and we had to go and throw it in the pond. It was very nice, I had to catch fish. But I'm just saying, like, who's responsible for Is that just me to go and pay to bring in another 18-wheeler? It's not even topsoil, like they're already losing some of the stuff they've,
Yes.
and then the concrete that says, what do you call this real quick, I'm sorry. The culvert, it's now sucking the land away from the outside. Because I see you out there all the time filming and taking pictures. I know you're watching it, but I just don't know what to expect for our own personal loss.
Yeah, no, so the answer to that question is I see it, and I do take pictures of it a lot. I do see it a lot. And I usually try to talk to the resident about it, especially if it's around a culvert. Okay, I'm gonna try to say this, and I think everybody understands this, especially if you live in the state of Texas for any point in time, you realize that there's a lot of changes between our season, and I'm not talking about hot to cold, but I'm talking about contraction on the soil. Whenever you don't water, when you do water, whenever they will let you water and when they won't let you water. And so you have a lot of that going back and forth, and that happens around culverts. If a pipe is under the road, is starting to pull away, or if it's breaking, that you need to let us know. Correct. Because that is what we do maintain. And we are looking for those actively. Like we were talking about earlier, a lot of stuff buried that goes underneath the road. But if it happens on private property and it's the one that travels underneath your driveway, or you have a pipe that's installed through your property that is owned by the individual, and you're starting to have that issue, then that's when it falls to the property owner. Or if, say, like in the instance what you're talking about, because actually I had this, so I do clean debris out from inlets. I had one where a whole fence panel was in there, but nobody did fencing in like the last 2 years. It actually came from Bartonville. That's how far it floated down. And so I loaded it up in the truck and I dispersed of it, but it happens. But at the end of the day, if it lands on your property, or if it's your property that's washing away, you're gonna have to do something about it. And that does fall to the property owner. Unfortunately, the town of Double Oak doesn't own any, it's not like your standard property rights like in Flower Mound or anything like that. It's not like we have like a bunch of rights to go out there. We don't have a water utilities department to collect fees from, which is one of the reasons we're talking about stormwater collection and maybe a possible fee or something at some future point, that if it works for everybody, that we were able to facilitate to make changes as we go along that doesn't impact people at such a high degree. But it really just falls all to the property owner in almost every single case, except for whenever it crosses under the road. And that's where it falls in line with us.
Okay, so, and forgive me, because my husband is the smart one in that regard, but we moved from Flower Mound, where we were in the neighborhood that received all this water coming down. In fact, one house has to evacuate every time, and the fireman has to get it. So I fought the neighbor that built the house behind us, because I watched a pipe pumping water into our yard. We did what you're talking about. Fought the town, and they're like, you're not in a flood zone, whatever. 5 years later, everyone in our neighborhood, you're in a floodplain, we suggest you raise your house or get flood insurance. How are we going to prevent that? Because I was not told, whatever. I'm assuming that us being in green means I need to be claiming flood insurance.
Have fun with that.
Because I didn't get told that when I bought my house. So did they know that it was a flood plain? Do you know what I'm saying?
She's talking about how you colored we colored the quad.
Talking about the structures.
Yeah, the potentially flooded structure, like.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
That's a potential.
Like I said, those were just the simple intersect. Does it actually flood or not? I don't know for sure. You'd have to go out and actually survey the finished floor elevation, the pad of the structure, and compare that to the model built.
So the only properties that I know in the town of Double Oak, as of right now, it doesn't mean that I know everything, but the ones that I know that I've actually laid eyes on and looked at the plans, are everyone that lives south of Kings Road. And most of those properties do live within the 100-year floodplain in most cases. And they absolutely have issues there. And I can tell you this, there were several vacant properties that people have been interested in. I've talked to a lot of the developers till I'm blue in the face for almost a year and a half, until they got sold by someone who bought them in the area, who is the owner already of the properties and is not going to develop on them, because they've asked, can I build a house there? I can't tell them they can't build a house, but you do have to build it to meet the flood zone patterns, and so no one wants to spend that kind of money. It is indicated there. We can't go out and find every single real estate agent and go, by the way, you need to tell these people before you sell it, this is XYZ what you need to do, because we don't know who they are and we don't know what they're doing.
Did they involve though with a house.
They're supposed to
now.
disclose it.
So that's what I'm saying, so if we have not been told, is there anything on this, or are you now saying that I have to go and pay for a survey so I know what to call insurance? Because like, I don't want, let's say somebody upstream does fix their culvert, nobody downstream from the pond does, and now suddenly we get, I mean, not much more, they've already had it inches from their house, and the one at the creek is at their front porch. So
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that you fall within the floodplain level. Let me say that.
I don't have to go and get flood insurance.
Yeah, so let me
That's
be
what I
clear
was
about that.
asking.
And I've had residents who are not in the floodplain area, and their drainage easements were not called out at all on their survey, they went to claim it on insurance, and the insurance said, you don't have anything indicated, we're not covering it.
For flood insurance, what you're saying?
Yes, they didn't have flood insurance. I recently just dealt with a resident in Double Oak who was trying to recuperate from something that actually happened. I'm not saying that you don't need it. What I'm telling you is you need to identify on your property whether you have drainage easements, and you can have your property evaluated to see if you fall within that. But I can tell you, Denton County typically keeps it on their website. If you fall within depending on the floodplain, like for example, the 100-year floodplain, that actually exists down south of Kings Road. It is indicated on Denton County side.
Yeah, the only FEMA floodplain you have is along
Yes.
Timber Creek right there. So
Correct.
all the other mapping you see north of there, that's not a FEMA floodplain. That's just floodplain identified by this study. Doesn't mean you have to purchase flood insurance. That's
Yes.
an individual property owner decision.
Correct.
So I just want to say, to you, when you bought your house, if you have a mortgage, your lender would have required a flood determination to have been ordered.
That's what I was like,
Yeah.
does the green dot now suddenly mean it changed, like my old home,
So-
where
No.
they're
So you
swore
had-
we were not, and then
Yeah,
just
you,
let
you
us
may
know.
not have it, your servicer probably has your flood determination because they all require it. If you were in a FEMA flood zone, you would have been required to buy flood insurance as part of
I still
the
wanted to
mortgage.
change like it did in our last house, that's
So-
my big thing.
I do want to say what Scott actually said earlier, and I think it's kind of being lost in interpretation. The houses that are identified in green fell in a radius for them to identify potentially that it could flood. Doesn't mean that it does flood. It just means it was close enough geographically to the water that was showing to collect in the area to say, hey, by the way, it's touching it, so then it is identified as it, correct?
Correct.
Doesn't mean that it's flooding there. He can't say that definitively. He's just saying that it touches the zone, so they then identify that it's at least close enough. You would have to get that determined by an engineer on your part if you feel like that it's within that flood zone. I mean, you know what happens at your house whenever it rains. I don't. I don't sit there. I'm not there when it's taking place. Sometimes I am. It's rare, but
You can go to the FEMA, I think it's the FEMA site and put in your address and it'll tell you if you're. in
yes.
flood.
And that's mostly in the south, honestly. Yes, sir.
You bring up a good point there, because I'm one of the greenhouses that's identified on there, and water never comes anywhere.
Yes.
So, when I first saw this, and I saw that you've got yellow lines in front of my house up to in front of Hank's down at the corner, like, I've never seen water there. Why do we have now a yellow line going down Whistling Gut and going?
So that yellow line was to indicate drainage improvements, underground drainage improvements of where they could possibly potentially put pipe underneath ground to move water from one location down to another location south of there. Correct?
Correct. It's underground pipe, so you have to find the path of least resistance, of downhill, and stay within the right of way, the street, right? We're not going to put a big improvement down the back of somebody's lot, on multiple lots. So.
Which way is this going?
Yes.
That's uphill.
Correct. So you'd have to butt grade. Correct. The pipe would actually be going downhill, even though it's maybe going uphill. It's a big cut. Yes.
That's what I have.
Well, I think they're going to increase the rate of flow. But it's going to help
The concept there is to try to pick up that flow at the upstream end and then provide an additional conveyance path with the storm drain. Because to provide improvements along the channel itself, it gets real tricky in trying to have construction, access to be able to do that and also not interrupt, the homeowners.
Which I will echo this, and Pat, you you can definitely echo the same sentiment, which was on the 2007. There were improvements that has tried to take place in the past where everybody was on board until they got down to talking about owners giving up certain inalienable rights to the back of their property to make those improvements, and it only takes one to can the whole thing. And the town spends an engineering funds to get the study done, which is fine. I mean, everyone's willing to do that. But if somebody decides, hey, by the way, no, you're not bringing it through my property, well, then that changes the whole design standards and you got to go back. So I think what Scott's trying to say is that conveyance that they're trying to take it on there, while it doesn't seem feasible or logical, a lot of that has to do with taking out of the place of the property owner's private property and back into the conveyance of where the public right-of-way may possibly be, so that it's less impactful to property owner's private property. Does that make sense?
It does. And that happened. So the culvert that comes down behind Cedar Crest Lane from Trailing Oaks to Ranch O Vista, that is my understanding. That culvert was supposed to extend all the way to where the blue is starting here. They had a homeowner that where it ended said, I don't want that in my backyard because people will skateboard in it. It killed it. They had to stop it right there at that cul-de-sac. And now if you look at this, and I spent 2.5 hours on a Sunday with 30 people from the Cedar Crest neighborhood and the Trailing Oaks neighborhood, and we walked all of that, and had they finished that project the way they should have, I don't think we would have been spending Sunday together. That happens. That happens.
Any other questions?
We do have a hard stop at 9 because we committed that to church. Are there some additional questions? I was going to recap some notes that I took.
So how soon are we actually going to be able to see the study?
The study will be, this study itself,
I mean, is there more to it than just this, or is it?
we're going to put all the documents out on our website and you can go pick them. We're going to put the 07, we're going to put this, we're going to put PowerPoint, we're going to put any of these documents, and believe me, they're going to change. We're going to create a drainage portal that you can go and get all this information. And we'll refer to it back and forth.
I mean, I don't want to hit you with a bunch of questions when I haven't seen what you're going to provide. So.
Just mention about getting on the email list for the Friday update.
Yes.
Just for anybody who's not in here, who might not be on those.
Yeah, I would love to, if you're, on Fridays, the town sends out an email. We blast it on the website. And if we don't have, I think we collected a bunch of emails tonight. And thank you for doing that, because this is now, I want to have back and forth communication. What we want to do is set up a process that it doesn't matter who the council is or who the mayor is, that it's something that can continue. And that's why we're starting what we're doing. That's why we're trying to capture this information. And because we think that, obviously, as I said at the beginning, hundreds of documents that talk about drainage all the way back to 74, right? That's how many mayors, how many councils. Sometimes it started, sometimes it stopped, sometimes it started, sometimes. We want to set it up to where it can be handed down to the next administration and continue this on. That's that marathon approach. So, and that's really what we want to start to accomplish. As far as what we're responsible for with the cross culverts and things like that, that's actionable things that we can sit and start to budget for and plan for. And then if we can get your help on starting to work on your bar ditches and culverts on your driveways, I think if we got 30% of the town just to clean up our bar ditches, and we did this study again, we would see a different study.
It would help.
It would help.
I guess I'd like to question that, because the way you described the study, all the bar ditches, that's not even the top.
They're in the model, and the mapping there is only showing things that are greater than half a foot.
Right.
Otherwise, if we showed everything with 100 feet, it'd be a big blue.
So the rate of flow of each of those garbage, what's assumed in the model? 25%? 50%?
There's a tool that we use to kind of burn a hole through these culverts. We can't model every single driveway culvert. So it does convey whatever's out there today in 2019 LiDAR.
or is that just for the life? That's what I was gonna say.
Oh, got it. So you captured it in this property?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
part of it.
Got it.
It's a
That's what I
it's a
said.
physical
Yeah.
on 2019. So not to be rude to anybody, but I'm going to cut it at that point. But I will state, I just wanted to follow up. We do have a sheet. You can take it with you. This is for the quadrant 1. If you want to fill it out, it says any comments that additionally that you want to add. You can put your name, your email, your phone number is optional, and then also put the flooding location, so your address or whatever your concern are. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a flood. It could just be the impacted water flow that you have at your property. You can let us know. We're collecting that information. So outside of that, I just wanted to thank everybody for their time. We really appreciate it, and we definitely look forward to y'all's comments and y'all's continued concerns, and we will address that.
So just in closing, I took some notes. This isn't guaranteed that we'll do it in the order or we'll get it all done right away. We are definitely going to send a formal letter to have Caruth Estates looked at in that specific area. So we'll get a quote from that. We'll have to bring it in front of council. I'm not going to speak whether the council will approve it or not, other than the fact that this is pretty important stuff. Randall is already working on conversations that are being had around the Brawley Pond, and I'm just going to leave it there. We may not provide a list of vendors because of the liability. One of the things that I am talking to Scott about is, okay, maybe we can provide the criteria of a vendor you would look for. One that does this, one that does that. That keeps the liability out of it, but yet gives you a direction of some sort. The other thing about that is that also we're going to hit up the homeowners association's presidents after this with what we find and say, okay, homeowners association president, start to gather your information from your town. Maybe you can cut a deal with the contractor that can come in and do 2 or 3 streets at a time. I did speak with one of the engineers, gentleman that was working on Wakeman Road, and we were talking about this. I can't remember his name, he was wearing a hard hat, but he was one of the foremen. And he talked about how they had a small town that needed to get drainage addressed. And the town didn't pay for it, but the citizens got together and hired a contractor to come in, and they sweeped up about 8 or 10 or 12 streets at a time. And they did it for a heck of a lot less than individuals doing it that way. And in that instance, that could be a choice. We discussed ordinances. Keep in mind, ordinance have to go through council. We're going to make sure we are as transparent and as public as possible with what these are before any of them go to vote. Simmons Road, we're going to find out what we're supposed to do from a clean out perspective. I don't know. So I'm going to give you that answer. I don't know. We'll find out. Other than wait for a 10-inch rain. 811. Please call 811 if you go to dig. And then we are going to ID all the cross culverts in town, and we're going to start to build a plan out for those. I can tell you that there's, I know for a fact that if you've driven down Cross Timbers just west of Cedar Crest in a 2 or 3 inch rain, there's 3 culverts there. There's no way that they're handling this. And I've already hit Randall up that we've got to start prioritizing this right away. And then we will do just a quick double check on the survey and flood stuff, just to make sure. And I'm sure there's going to be more that you're going to send to us or email to us. I want to thank you all for taking the time this evening to come out. I love the questions. I wish we could come in and fix everything for you, but we cannot by law, and we sure as heck can't by budget. But we're going to look into alternatives to what the town can do to fix some of the main areas, bond funds. I don't know about stormwater usage, don't know yet, but trust me, if it goes to discussion, we'll make sure we have a public hearing. So, thank you all. I appreciate you all very much. Have a great rest of the evening.